excitement to me. I mean, it's quite a big painting to do, so it's going to be fun. And I don't like to do things that are just sort of the same, repeating, boring every time over. Last time I was here, was anybody here last time?
Yeah.
Right. That's the painting finished that I did for you last year. The acrylic underpainting with a roller and then the oils over the top. So, you know, about half an hour afterwards, it was an oil on top of us. It was an older one of mine. It was done about 15 years ago. This is South Landing in Bridlington, Flamborough. Now, on this painting today, with a watercolour, we shall be painting fairly tonally. But something I get asked a lot about is you know, why using that colour, or how bright is the colour, or I'm going to just pass those around for your interest, because there's a difference between colour intensity and tone, a great deal of difference. And the yellow might look very, very bright, but actually tonally it might be quite dark. So if I actually pass that colour circle around on those variations of colours, then photographed in black and white, the same painting there in black and white, you can actually see the difference then in how dull a colour might be. It's only bright because of its colour intensity. Now, when we're painting, in our armoury, you've got rough against smooth, you've got cool against warm, you've got light against dark as the main ones. Then we've also got colour intensity, the opposites in the colour circle. Constable use this a lot because you'll notice in almost everyone put a figure with a fluorescent jacket. You wouldn't be using fluorescent paint. You'd be using the opposites or darkened lights to make that jacket show out. Now, this technique I'm going to use today was shown me by an artist in New Zealand, and he paints 3 times that size at times in his studio. So it's great fun, and it's the opposite way to what we would normally work with watercolour. Normally we start fairly loosely and then tighten up, yeah? And I'm always like that. I'm a loose man. I start loose and I finish tight. That way I'm in control. I can stop when I want. If I start tight, I can't go loose again. It's very hard to. Although you can, there's always an exception to the rule. If you've messed up a watercolour, you can go back over it with pastels, and you can paint it with water and pastel. I didn't bring one today, but I love painting with water and pastel. You can just, it's so fluid, you can paint it just like a watercolour. You can put the pastel onto the paper. I usually use a hot-pressed arches for that one, smooth surface. But if you wanted to snow scene, then you could obviously use a knot. I'm using a £300 rough today. Because of this particular style, we start fairly tightly, or reasonably, I'm still going to paint very loosely on it, then we gradually take out the salient points, and then at the end, suddenly pull it all together with loose painting. It suddenly just appears, it's great fun. And it takes away this worry about, how do I paint a figure in, how do I make it pull together, how do I think one of the golden rules for me, and the same with this plein air one, that lady with the poppies there, Rosie, painted an agate on. That's painted in plein air in 2.5 hours. I work very, very quickly. So, you know, she stood there, that's painted just over 2 hours, that painting, on site. Now, where do you start? Well, it's a quick bit of drawing, obviously, fairly loose drawing, but it wants to be very well drawn, because it's better to work loosely into a good drawing than to just try and work loosely over a bad drawing. You know, you can go the other way around. But think about it in this way. Simply treat it like a jigsaw. Put the right colours relevant to each other, in the right shapes, in the right places. Don't worry about what it is. If those right colours are in the right shapes and in the right places, relevant one to another, so don't just paint one bit and finish it, keep the whole painting going, as I'm going to be doing here overall, then it will come together like a jigsaw. These things will suddenly appear. An example of that I've given on the website is, I was a student years ago, I was a student at Camberwell in London, and I was painting a garden, my father's garden, and we had a couple of standard roses, cream and red. And I got the whole garden done, even the roses to the end. Look, could I get these damn things right? They kept looking like chocolate box plastic roses, whatever I did. And I was going about it the wrong way. I painted the whole garden loosely, one thing to another, and then I was trying to paint these roses especially. No, paint the roses the same as the rest, just like the facets of a jewel. One shape relevant one to another, and the roses just appeared. If you try to put a dog in afterwards or a figure in afterwards and paint it differently, it will stand out like a sore thumb. Keep the whole thing the same if possible. So in this case, it's slightly different to that. We're going to start slightly tighter in some areas and then work out fairly loosely. And I'm going to be using these techniques of, you know, all the standard watercolour techniques are going to be going, and I'm going to be painting wet into wet, wet next to wet. I'm going to be blending edges. I'm going to be doing some textural work. Now, what do I keep for my basic jobs and smaller ones? I'm going to pass 3 brushes around as well. I want you to feel the difference in the tips of those brushes. Very, very important for watercolour. Right, rule 1, do not buy rubbish watercolours. You can buy students' acrylics, you can buy students' oils, fine. But in watercolour you must buy artist quality. It's vital, because they're more transparent, they're higher quality, they'll go further. It's only a short-term, temporary thing. If you buy cheaper watercolours, they don't go as far, you're losing more, they don't give the same luminosity. So artist watercolour only, whereas you get away with the students on oils or acrylics more. Now these brushes I'm passing around, why I'm asking to feel the texture, you'll notice there's a nylon one there, which is one of the ones that we'll be looking at from New Zealand. It's great for dry brushwork. If you want to drag a brush across a rough surface, then you're much better having a slightly stiffer brush. Too stiff and you can't get anything done. Soft like the oval mop, it's going to go into the texture and you're going to drop the colour right in. So I've got an oval mop there, which is lovely and soft. That's one of my favourites. And I can almost, like Ron Ranson, and I'm giving you a hate there as well, but I can almost finish an entire painting with that mop, and then just come down with a small round or 2 or 3 or something at the end, or a rigger. But the Ron Ranson, again, you've got the horsehair there, so 3 different textures and reasons for those, to get the paint into the paper or across the surface of the paper. Now, some colours are great mixed, but other colours sometimes are brighter and nicer when they're dropped into each other. So I'm just looking at this pink colour here and thinking, right, we're going to be working from light to dark as standard watercolour. I do want plenty of colour. I'm not going to use a limited palette. I'm going to really pile some colour into here. And I want to start playing cools against warms as well. I think what I'm going to do here is drop in a very thin coat of aureolin straight away. So I'm just going to drop that, wet that straight away. I'm going to be painting by numbers basically at first here. I just want to get areas of this covered, and I'm working on a vertical, which is not going to make life any easier for me because I'm going to have triggers going everywhere, but we'll keep it nice and loose. And the reason I'm going to start with that aureolin is because I want to... See, I love it. That's the aureolin yellow. It's a beautiful yellow, isn't it? You know, it's much more transparent than the lemon.
What colour is that?
This is aureolin. If you want to look at that list, was it A-U-R-O-L-E, something like that. It's weird spelling. Right, and I'm going to drop into that. There's a lovely cool going here, and there's some warms. So let's go for my cobalt violet, which is a colour I said we couldn't make. It's a very, very useful colour, this cobalt violet. There's plenty of colour in this painting. I really want a nice sunny day today. We've got one outside anyway, so let's... Painting loosely at first, wet into wet. I'll make it a bit cooler in a moment. So straight in, lovely and loose. Start doing some textures already. I can tighten up as I go along. Right, a bit warmer. So a little bit of rose going in now. And we're playing these colours one against another. We're playing this warm against the cool. We're playing... If I put a warmer colour in, it makes that cooler. So if I put a warm against a cool, the warm would be warmer, the cooler would be cooler. And it's the same with texture as well. So just wet into wet at the moment. Nice and loose. Let's get these areas covered. When I've got a colour on my brush, if I see it elsewhere, I tend to use it. As I say, I want to keep the whole painting going, so we'll put these ears in straight away. Now, a bit cooler on there. Try and see these colours. Let's try a little bit of cerulean into that. A little bit cooler. So I'm dropping one colour into another to get this effect of the jersey. Let it trickle down. And I want to go warmer still, so I'll take a little bit of cadmium red. And you see how much warmer that cadmium is straight away. You want to keep it to almost single brush strokes. Just get it on, leave it alone. Don't fiddle with watercolour. Don't play around with it too much. Put it on and let it alone. Just enjoy it. Well, and that's it. That's how it's facing. Right, I'm going to go to a slightly warmer colour now. I want to go to, let's have a look at that first. I want to go down to a burnt sienna, I think, now. We'll slap his face straight in, like painting by numbers here. Fairly strong. Remember that watercolour is going to dry lighter than you've painted it. Right, we've got that, and I want to get some cool into that, so I'm going to take a little touch of cobalt. Keep it simple. We don't want to be painting in lots of details of eyes and noses, and let that blend in. His hair coming down the back there, a little bit darker in a minute. I'm going to reach out like a fencing match here. Keep it simple. Slightly warmer on that. A little bit of the rose into there. Let that blend in. Give him some warmth. A little bit cooler. There we go. Let's cool that down a fraction. Let it trickle around. And the back of his head's a bit darker, so I'm just going to make it a bit darker at the back. But you see, it's a lovely way to paint. It's so loose. Just slap it on and enjoy it. Let's look at this cool on him now. Again, I'm going to start with my cobalt violet there again. Not going to wet it first this time. I just want a bit of shadow coming down here. Don't mind if it links in at the moment. I'm having to work at a funny angle here, but so you guys can see. Now I've got that colour in, I'm going to come to a bit of cobalt and bring that shadow round. We can use this way painting outdoors. On my videos you'll see that. It's a very nice way to work on plein air, just the same. Find those very quickly. Let the paper shine as well. Use the paper, let the paper say quite a lot for you. Blue coming behind there. I'm going to work very loosely, very rapidly. His hat. It's almost white anyway. A little bit of shading here and there. You see I put masking fluid on already. I have cheated on this one. It's not one I've done earlier, but almost. But I'm hoping the masking fluid is still going to come off because it was put on some weeks ago now. So much to do with it. Right. While that's still just wet enough, I'm going to drop a bit more colour back in, put more shading back into that. Round back of his head. Here. Okay, let's come down to her hair. Don't try and paint too much detail in it straight away, just feel it. Now I'm going to go for my aureole yellow again. And a little bit of white left at the top there. In fact, it comes over her whole face, so I can do that straight away. Looking at that, I can come right down. If you see a colour, might as well use it. Got it going anyway. Now that's that should be raw sienna, I think. Crop that in as raw sienna. Same there. So we've got aureole in yellow, now I'm dropping in some raw sienna, which again is a lovely transparent colour. A little warmer. Go back to my previous. Keep it simple. Bring back into there in a minute. I can come in with a smaller brush any time I want, and this is dried off a bit, and do details. Not too worried about that. Right. The cools behind here, let's have a look at those. So a little touch of warm, a little touch of cobalt, I think. So, yeah, that'll do. Bring that through. I'm going to let some of the dry, just a little bit of, just using the edge of the brush now. Even though it's a soft brush, I'm going to let the paper show a bit of dry brushwork going on. Just tickling it across the top there. Painting should be fun. If we're having to struggle too much, and something's going wrong, I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing now. I'm just enjoying putting this paint on. So I am painting slightly tonally as well, but it's more about colour at the moment. And the beauty of the mop as well is that you can make it into a blade. So if I take that mop and use it sideways, I get a fine blade, which means I don't have to come in with a rigger here. I can come in with the edge of the blade and just paint those stripes in fairly easily with the blade. Let that dry off a bit more. Just getting the effects of light. And that's what I'm actually doing at the moment, isn't it? I'm painting effects of light. Burnt sienna, little ultramarine, one of my favourite colours. It's darks in. Now she's got a little bit dry, but I'd like to have... So I'm going to actually go back there and just wet her hair slightly again, because it has dried, and that means that I can go back with these effects of light again and drop wet into wet and let it just shine through. Just remember how far it's spreading. And I can teach anybody how to paint with oils or acrylics just by demonstrating. But with watercolour, as you watercolourists, because there'll be a few amongst you here that are experts, probably more so than me, I'm just showing you another way of working. With watercolour, it's a medium that you've got to practice with to get the feel of it. And even if I come back to doing a watercolour, having done oils, quite often I've got to loosen up and do a couple before I can really get into it. I might well put a second wash over. Now the difference between a glaze and a wash is your primary wet colour onto the surface of the paper. A glaze is a secondary colour over the top of that. So if we put on the Aureole in yellow, let it dry and then put exactly the same glaze over the top, it would be twice as dark. But the wash is the first one, and it can be a graduated wash or a variable wash. If I wanted a sky here, I could put a wash in and gradually change it as the colour comes down. And that would graduate it or variegate the colour. And that's another reason why it's important to get to know your palette as to what is a transparent colour and what isn't. Because obviously if you're trying to paint lemon yellow over something, it won't be much a glaze, it would be more of an opaque rather than the Aureole in yellow. It'll all come, don't be frightened by it. And something like the greens, don't be afraid to get your paint and mix those greens with yellows and blue first. Experiment and explore. Take a piece of paper for heaven's sakes, unless we try new ways, like I tried with the acrylic inks and the pastels. Unless you explore, unless you have that fun, you're not going to move forward. We do need to try new things. I've said this story a couple of times. I don't know whether I said it last time, but there's a lovely guy who lives in Bridlington. He's dead now, but he was very wealthy at the time. And he let us use his studio, his hall, for the Bridlington Art Society meetings. And he had his paintings spread all around. And the one problem I found, lovely as he was, and though I enjoyed his work, was that in all those 80-odd years of his work, I couldn't see any progression. I'm going to drop wet into there again in a minute. And you know, if he'd taken a chance, so we had all these paintings going right around the wall for about 30, 40 years he was painting, but there was no progression, there was nothing else. That's a nice dark. There was no experimenting or exploring or... Remember that in shadows, there are cools and warms as well. That shadows aren't just a grey. If you want a grey, you mix blue and brown, fine. There's all sorts of greys you can make. For you oil painters, if you want to make a lovely grey, try mixing alizarin crimson and viridian green sometime. Never thought of mixing those two together, you'll find it's a beautiful grey for skies. So into that I've just done, I can now drop a little bit more burnt sienna into that, and it will make quite a difference. It will lift it just that little bit. Yeah? And it's painting by numbers. It's going to gradually come together as that gets drier now. There's a little feel. Yeah, it's a bit too wet. I haven't painted with that at the moment, not quite yet. And I may need to go a bit darker on some of these areas. I think I will already. I want to come in a little bit on that shadow. I'd like a little bit more warmth coming to there. So this is now a glaze. This is a second colour going on, quite loosely. Somebody's got a loud radio on that. So I can make sharper and harder edges. Wet next to wet gives you a soft edge, wet into wet gives you a soft edge, wet on dry gives you a hard edge, and that's when you start to get your details like that. This hair, and a thin coat of aureolin, just to get it going. And then we'll use some cool, let that just drop in, make it a bit more of a grey, add a bit of brown to it, keep it loose. How are we doing? Half an hour, right? Yes, about on time, I reckon. If I can, I tend to be very lazy. If I can, I try to get away with just one brush for the whole painting, just about. That's the only reason in changing it for something to do. Right. Now this quite complicated chair down here, which is wicker work, I've already done little bits of light masking fluid, so I can take those off later and tint the white areas down to a yellow. But I might like a little bit more texturing going on there. It's tad off raw sienna, a little bit of my umber and sienna mixture will do that. Straight in. Let's get these areas covered and get into this effect of light as quick as I can. And that same colour can go on back if I dress there. Perhaps a little bit more. Just going into that dress. There we go. A little bit more yellow in there. Well, I've got the yellow on my brush. A little bit of cadmium yellow. Let's whack it in here as well. And then it goes something warmer, so I'll use a Cleethorpes gold down there for that. This guy's head back here. Let's give him an entire wash of that. There we go. That Cleethorpes gold's quite nice. These Cleethorpes colours are. Cleethorpes red's a lovely one as well. If I put a slightly cooler colour in there, make that warm come out a bit more. Hard edge. So go back with my brush, a damp brush, and soften it back in again. So we're blending. A lot of versatility to watercolour. You can lift it out. People think, once you've made a mark, you've had it. No, you can still play around quite a bit with it. Just find the forms here. Not for me. Not easy. I actually would normally be sitting back with a larger stool and working at this from a distance. So I'm having to work quite close up here. So I hope I'm getting it right. Now, let's find some of the lines of this. So I'm trying to keep fairly loose all the time, gradually tightening up more and more. Now, what have we got down here? This glass. Let's have a bit of that here again. Use the paper a bit. And a little bit darker. Keep it simple, keep it loose, keep it light. You can paint as tightly as you want. I don't have any students coming to me and I say, this is how it is done. I say, this is a way of painting. And I try to help them to find their own directions as best I can by showing them different techniques and methods. Let the eye do the work. Don't paint in every detail for everybody. Just loosely give an impression of something, gradually build it up then. You're the one in control. Alright. We don't have to paint pink faces, green trees, blue sky. Look for those colours that are there and bring them out. bit of purple I want on there now. Where is it gone? Must be purple. No, that's not it. There we are, that's the one. It'll thin out in a moment. And the same here, a little bit thinner. So it's in shadow there, so and around the same. That part of his coat's in shadow. Part of the hair is. And we're also working negative shapes as well, so we've got lost and found edges, we've got negative shapes, we've got all sorts going on. Now what I mean about a negative is we're working a light against the dark, so if I paint that shape in there, it comes against this chap's head here to make it stand out. It's even darker. So I don't say this is the way to do it, I say this is another way, which I'd love you to try, and I think that having seen this you might hopefully think, well that was rather fun, I'll have a go at that later. Thin that down a bit, and just let the water do the rest there. Jumble of things going on there, so too much. Just indicate. And as the paint dries, you see I'm going back into places because it's become too light. I'm going back in there with the colours as well to darken it down again. Gradually making up these negative shapes and building the painting up. Is it working from back there? Because I can't see it from here. Is it gradually coming? I can't tell, honestly. All I can see is the blobs of paint here. But that's what I'm doing. I'm just painting. Like I said, I'm trying to paint the right shapes in approximately the right colours in the right places. And if I do that, hopefully, from a distance there, this is gradually going to work. And it's the same way in oils, you know, or pastel things. You can use this technique in the same way. Wash, make it darker still, I think. Bring them right down. Please, I should have said that. Simple colour, let's not try overdoing it. Trying to keep things nice and simple. It's not harder yet, but we'll gradually get there. Now that's rather fun, that turquoise area there. And we're going to go about that. If I'm going to make that blue, yes, cerulean, but I think I'm actually going to start with the green there first of all. I'll give a thin wash of green first to get that colour. As compared to the rest of the colours, and then come in with my cerulean. And it's even deeper blue still into the corner, which will really make that look more turquoisey. That green is far warmer over there, I haven't finished that one yet. Look at the blue in it though. Trousers paint again. So remember, we've got this grey masking fluid to lift off yet, so don't panic about, or I shouldn't panic about the lights, because I know I can bring them back later. Or lean over there. A little bit more ultramarine into that hatband. Well, it's still wet. The darks on. Just look at the edge of that person's hair there. And work up a few of those little bits of dark. This guy here. So I'm going to come down to some finer brushes in a minute to get a few more details done, but we're on the way. Again, that's better. And it feels a bit cooler. Just indicate things. I want to put lots of detail in. Yeah. Do that at the end. Now that height brush I passed around, they're very useful because if you get use the end in a slightly broken way, I've got one here. I'm just going to try and show you that for a moment. Let's get a bit of paint on it. If I use it a little bit more dryly, break that end up a bit. So I want to get a bit of texture. You see I can do that. Great for trees as well. We can use sponges, we can use different techniques. What's that going across there? Right, what have we got? He's back here, she's there. I'd like her to be a bit darker actually, she's sunk a bit. Not only sunk. Let's really get some colour back there. Just indicator fingers, just a couple of strokes should do it. And she needs a pair of glasses as my little brush. Much as I hate having to pick up a small brush, to just put those glasses in. Keep it simple. There's a watch. 2 marks make a watch. I don't want to be putting eyes, noses and all sorts of details. I just want to indicate here the face. And this is why I might start using a sword brush, because I can't now use the edge of the brush. If I wanted to have more control, then it would be useful to take a brush like that and be able to come in and use it sideways like that as well. Simple. Remember that in every colour there's a warm and a cool. For every single colour you've got, whether it be greens or browns or blues. We've said with the blues that the cerulean is the coolest. And then let's go back to my mop. I think, yes. And yet again, we've got this playing of light against dark going on there. too dark and too cool. There's a bit of purple coming into there for fun. And then behind this guy here, there's some dark waste bins going on. Just indicate them. And let that bleed in together. Right through there. This figure here, she needs a bit of tidying up. She wouldn't be very pleased with the way I'm telling her at the moment. A slight frown on the logo. Just find those glasses. To draw too much, because that's another thing commercially, people don't want to buy portraits of other people's kids or whatever else. They want it slightly more impressionist. They want to think it's their children or their... So I'm just trying to make an impression of these things. I'm not trying to paint in somebody exactly. If I was doing a family portrait, that'd be different, but we would obviously do it then. But see if we're getting that right or not. Sword. I think for that. Who have I missed? Tissue, I think, in a minute. Right, so let's take a little bit of cadmium yellow and put it in over here. There we go. And a bit more strength there as well. As a rule, in a landscape, the colours are warmer in the foreground and more in detail in the foreground, and cooler into the background, but of course there will be exceptions to any rule, and one of those exceptions will be a sunset. But it's like a photograph. If you take a photograph, usually you're focusing on the foreground area and the background, unless you deliberately do it in the moment. And if we're going to paint square windows, well obviously you're better painting a round hole with a round brush and a square hole with a square brush, so it's handy to keep the various shaped brushes in rather than trying to use a sword or anything else up there. We're going to come up to that background shortly and really start working. And I want to get all of this done and I can remove this masking fluid and see wood for trees, which I can't quite at the moment. Indicating things, don't try and be exact. make things look very complicated just by indicating them. See the beauty of that sword, you can change direction whenever you like. You can paint a thin line, like those chair legs, or you can paint a heavier mark, like a tablecloth. That's all right. Might just make it quite a challenge. Makes it more exciting. I still want to do something more with this. I'm not happy with that area. For the moment, I'll make that harder. Of Captain Orange there, I think. Some masking fluids, that'll be right. A bit more. See enough. Play these negative shapes, one against another, very important to make this figure stand out. Now, nice big flat. Let's have some fun. And you see how that gives that dry brush effect with a slightly stiffer brush. If I don't want that, I put more water in and I go in more softly, or I go back to my knot just to show you the difference. Huge difference in just the brush. But it's very important to bear these things in mind. I'm going to do more with the knot to lose a lot of this texture at the moment, then I'm going to go back over again with that flat towards the end. I'm really get moving now. You can see I'm actually mixing paint on the, using a little bit of the Quinquedrone gold and a little bit of very light red there to get this effect for the background. Now some bright red, just a touch there to brighten things up. I don't want a nice sunny day. Make it a bit cooler coming down there, so a bit more rose. Just cool it down with some. Seem a bit exaggerated, but it's going to be fun. And I want to keep it loose. I'm not going to paint a perfect sky like that. I want a bit of white showing. It's a watercolour, it's not a photograph, it's a painting. It's something to enjoy it. Nobody else here knows this street, so they're not going to look at this and say, that signpost is 2 foot to the left, Pete. No, it doesn't matter. Rolling yellow again, get in there, a little bit thicker this time. A bit wet into wet first. Joy of watercolour. Beauty we can get with watercolour. It doesn't have to be so dead. People say, why watercolour? Ron Ransom once said it about painters. Why do people using watercolour have to paint as if it's got a piece of gauze over it? You know, it can be. You can do beautiful things. I mean, if I want to paint a Scottish scene, then a limited palette of watercolour is great because you've got the dull, wet into wet. Lovely. But if I want to paint a more Mediterranean scene like this, it's quite possible. And if you look at the cover of the one I did in Cuba, you can see a couple of watercolours there. This one I did of boats on plein air. Lovely and bright. Doesn't have to be morbid and miserable. You don't even have to go right to the side of the paper. Enjoy the paint, enjoy making the marks, enjoy the whole act of painting. Tip of the brush, using that technique I was telling you about, just making the brush into a blade. I'm still painting wet into wet. What's a nice bright colour going on now? It's summertime. I'm having fun at the moment. I just took a whole series with my fiancée yesterday. 380 pictures in about half an hour, because she changed. I was very devious because it was her birthday on the 12th, and I went and bought her 4 lovely coloured dresses in the market, not for her, for me really, so she could model for me these flowers, these lovely bright blues and turquoise. So I've got some wonderful photographs to use now over the winter season. Oh, by the way, if you're interested, if any of you are in art groups or art societies, or you wish to sell your own paintings, there is an event coming up of which my garden is one of the 4 sites, and it's called Spirit of the Marsh. So if you go onto my website and go to forthcoming events, you can get the details of the lady that's running it, Anna Salter. You may have a stand free of charge to hang your work. They want 15% of sales. That's it. Other than that, you've got 2 days. You get 2 free tickets to do the whole of the events, which includes Viking longships and all sorts of Viking village and the music and everything else. They're charging 10 quid a head normally for the day. So it is like almost like a music festival, a music concert. But if you're interested in that, go to my site, look that up, and book as soon as you can with Anna Salter, and I will guarantee you a place in my garden where you can come and just relax and enjoy and try and sell your work, or the art society that you're in can bring their display of work and just show if they want. So I'd love to see you there. There's barbecue facilities and all that sort of stuff as well if you want to do anything like that. The work can be locked away overnight as well, safely, securely. Now, what I'm doing, you see, is working wet into wet, and gradually, as it's drying, I'm tightening up. So I'm getting this blurry effect in the background, and gradually tightening up these leaves towards the end, so that I'm getting a slightly out of focus, but part of this scene leaf. And I've yet to lift off this masking fluid, which is going to make quite a difference as well. Courses for courses, square brush. Just indicating I'm still not trying to paint anything exactly. Don't need to do that. About a long time, really. I might have to take a walk to the back of the room in a minute because I do need to start seeing it a bit further away. with that bit. I haven't done much very strong colour there. Let's see what we can do. Yes, that's what I can do. A bit more shadow under this. If you want to see more tone in the scene, then squint your eyes down. If you want to see this painting tonally now, squint. So you can only just see it, and you'll find you can see the tones much more easily. And for colour, it's the opposite. Widen your eyes wide out, and you'll see the colours more easily. Push these colours a bit more now. Watercolour doesn't have to be dead. Make that tone darker again. I want it really down. I'll bring some of that warm across and into his shirt. Down through there. Right, I'm going to just let it dry off a little bit because I want to get this masking fluid off now and I can really see where I am. You get these masking fluid off, you can see the highlights and then tidy things up. Now to remove masking fluid, your fingers are alright, but actually you're better off with a handkerchief or a cloth. I do find that, you know, of course, you've got to make sure it's dry because you're going to make some nasty smudges if you don't. So let's see if we can get this masking fluid off. It's been baking in the sun. This is something you mustn't do. If you're working out of doors and you put masking fluid on, and the sun gets to it, it will melt into the paper, and that's not good. And this has sort of melted in fairly well. It's giving me a slightly... Right, coming back to fine tuning.
Well, the anaesthetic was based on this, wasn't it?
I think that's when it took how many
Yeah. Does he have to look at the Is this your
And it's knowing when to finish, isn't it? Because now I could keep on putting more and more detail in. I need to get back from it. I need to look at it and see, little points to make. But as far as I tend to, I think, for the demonstration purposes, for this way of painting loosely, whatever palette you wanted to use, I could have used just a few colours and made it a wet, rainy day. I could have dragged with the flat brush and made more of reflections and things on the streets and so on. But the idea today was just to give you a very loose way of painting, a simple way of atmospherics, which I hope I've done.
Yes, thank you.
What I suggest is
Do you actually see them?
I can see, I can actually almost see to a filter. If I want to, I can force myself to see almost any power of a colour behind something. But I can actually see that pink in there. But it's comparative. Do not look at just one thing and paint it. You have to look at that compared to that. That is a greener tint compared to that pink. And then this has more blue in it. Obviously the green behind the turquoise there I was trying to find before I put the blue on, because I knew that it was more green, it would work. Much warmer blues here. The yellow's behind that green. I'd want to put a bit more green in there yet, possibly. But it's playing one colour against another to try and get it to work.